and welcome to our September meeting. I hope everybody's ready to go live across the world for another 300,000 hits. So I even put a tie on this morning just in case. A bit of a shock. But anyway, yeah, very warm welcome. Hopefully we're not on Zoom for too much longer. We're heading in the right direction anyway. So to start the meeting off, do we have any apologies? I think we're all here, present and correct. So there's no apologies. Are there any disclosures? Item 2, any disclosures of members' interests? No, there are none. Any late items? Item 3. No, no late items. So the confirmation of the order of the meeting, I haven't received anything to say we need to change that. So I'm assuming we'll go as it's in the agenda.
Happy to move, Jim.
Moved Councillor O'Regan, Susan and Andrew Brown. All those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. If I don't hear anybody screaming, I will assume that it's affirmative all the way through the meeting. Council's updates on attendances. Are there any? I know it's probably been pretty light from meetings, etc. But is anything anyone wants to catch us up with? Marcus.
Well, you know, my world famous TV appearance yesterday.
Yeah, we did note that. Yeah, and well done, by the way. I know congratulations have already been passed to you outside of the meeting, but officially it's great. And I think some of the comments, apart from us being probably white noise and putting kids to sleep, it was good to hear comments back that the way in which we conduct the meeting and the good, I suppose, vibe that comes out of our council meeting, it's great to hear. So that's fantastic. Yep, Philip and then Hazel.
Yep, thanks, Jim. Morning, everyone. I do support mental health, but I just didn't have time to put up the backdrop or whatever. But yep, no, definitely support that. Obviously, all meetings were attended virtually, but during September or over the last month, along with probably Liz and Roger, attended the Regional Connections meeting with the Regional Council. There was a CCTV meeting as well. There was a spokesperson from Auckland that joined us, and that was actually really positive. Actually, it seems like our technology is up to speed. It just needs to be set up properly. So that was quite encouraging. There was a national eyesight AGM, which was pretty straightforward. And then again with Liz and Roger, there's been a wellbeing or welfare virtual group working, you know, just on during lockdown to make sure that the Cambridge Community House and everybody homeless or in need or just whatever issues there are around Cambridge and Pacific were looked after. Also with people, elderly people that don't have family around them, so to make sure that they weren't missing out. I did a few home deliveries for people there like I did last year. Wasn't nearly the same demand as last year. Last year was really busy, but this year wasn't so bad. And then we've had the Christmas parade meeting, so that's on the 5th of December. We're going to invite the Olympians along to that, make it a sporty one, Christmas parade, so that'll be really exciting. It is the Hamilton Christmas parade on the same day, but we've got the Olympians, so that'll be a big draw card. So yeah, so that was it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Just on the Christmas parade, and Liz was obviously trying to organise a welcome home for the Olympians, but COVID has nicely torpedoed most of those efforts. So at the present time, we were thinking that the Christmas parade could double up as that welcome home without organising anything separate at the moment. Liz, did you want to comment on that at all? But I think that's probably the best way for us to go.
Yeah, I think that's the only option at this point. I mean, depending on levels, we may not even be able to hold a Christmas parade, but I guess we just wait and see what that brings. But yeah, unfortunate that we couldn't hold something sooner, but because it's likely that a lot of our Olympians will have gone far and wide. They kind of base themselves in Cambridge, but many of them return to their families around New Zealand. So yeah, how many we can attract, it's a little bit hard to know, but we'll wait and see.
So yeah, thanks, Philip, for that. So that'd be helpful. Did you just want to add something?
Yeah. So obviously we can't do it unless we're in level 1. And the other thing is Rotary are a big player in helping us with the Christmas parade. So the 5th of December, we were looking at a date at the end of November, but the 5th of December worked better for everybody. So yeah, but obviously it has to be level 1 for any of these things to go ahead. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Hazel, you had something.
Yes, and probably not as just. I actually managed to go to the men's shed. Now I had this wonderful thing that I have here. It's a tricycle with a horse mounted on it, and I'd left it outside, and it got all rusty, and the paint was all peeling off. So I thought I'll take it to the men's shed. And I haven't been there before. I knew where they were. And it was just so great. They have done the most amazing job on repairing it. But also while I was there, I was able to, they needed some things for the house, and able to steer them towards a funding source, not necessarily the council, which it looks as though they've got the money. They need a new lawnmower. But what an amazing group of men in our community that just enjoy being together at the same time as they're doing all these very good things for the community. And they just said, oh, I could just pay for the parts. And I said, but I must give you something for your time. They don't expect that. That's what they don't expect. You can make a donation if you like, which I did, but what an amazing, and everybody knows them, it seems, as a very caring group of people that we have. So yes, I was totally impressed, and I thought I would just say something this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Hazel.
Yeah.
Yep, Phil.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, just on carrying on from Hazel, we've got a men's shed at Resthaven in Cambridge too, and they do a phenomenal job. They got Wednesday is a community day, so residents from the community, the wider community, can come in and they make some amazing stuff for the community and for themselves and things like that. And then the residents of Resthaven are in there most other days. George Dingle and Ray Kellip are the 2 main drivers there, and they make memory boxes. They make these amazing bench seats that carpet that came from George's farm out at Taufori, and you can purchase them, but he gives them to the community, or Resthaven community anyway. So yeah, they do a phenomenal job, just like they do in Te Awamutu or Kiiki. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Bruce, and then Mike.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended 2 meetings. The first, ComSafe, was very busy. We were able to do that. Our community safety officer, Maddie Merson's been very busy in the community. There's been some positive moves towards the CCTV. It's encouraging, more encouraging for a long time. And there's going to be a meeting in the future with the Cambridge Safer Community Trust. So hopefully we can get together as a team in the very near future. Who knows? Interesting with COVID, our patrolling hours in August 2020 were 612 as compared with this year, which dropped to 21 hours. So that's a big difference about people being able to get out in the community. And last night, Claire and I had the honour of going to the Koramatua Hall AGM, which is the furthest north we attend. It's quite a trek into that sun. There was amazing sunset last night, and I was going straight into it, but that was good. They're a very active community for a small hall. It's immaculate. And I was talking to one of the attendees last night, and if any of us can get to 90 next February, this guy is, I've got to just keep doing what we're doing. It was amazing to see some of these older people that are so active. But yeah, 2 meetings, 2 good meetings. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Mike?
Thank you, Jim. Just first thing, just about an acronym, and this is for Marcus. Well done, Marcus. And the acronym, of course, for the TARDIS is time in relative dimension and space. Just a piece of useless information.
Well done, Mike. You've done your homework.
Yeah, just so we know that. So yeah, attended that meeting also, that CCTV meeting by Zoom, and it was very interesting. And it does seem there's some hope to get a better quality system going for Cambridge, which would be great. And the other thing, yesterday I attended that global walk for the elderly at the Raceway, which was also supported by Tim he's in charge of the gold card up from Wellington, and also Harriet came from the Cambridge Community House. The Rotary supported it with their band. And there was probably, I'm guessing, probably about 70 people there. We took some from school and grandparents, and it's hard to sort of how many you take, not to go over the 100, so it was quite a balancing act. But yeah, so no, that's a bit of it for me. Oh, and also actually just one last thing, like probably most of us received many emails and also phone calls from people concerned about the direction of Three Waters that's out there in the public at present. And I think we, on this side of the swamp, have a meeting this afternoon just to have a discussion around that with a few councillors.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So Liz, Susan, Claire and Lou with their hands up. So Liz.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Hey, yeah, so just a few things. So first of all, yeah, the CCTV, which I'm chairing at the moment, and as everyone has said, it's going in the right direction. But what's really important now is we get a really good result for our town. So we're going to keep having those meetings. And just to say that staff have been extremely supportive in trying to find a solution and get this on track. So yeah, thanks very much to Brian in particular. The ongoing welfare checks that have been mentioned as well. Yeah, I think we're probably going to be sort of refocusing our attentions more around the business community. I think this is where we've been hit hardest this time round, and again, mostly the hospitality and Waipa. But we'll, yeah, hopefully be able to lessen those meeting times and things soon. Hey, just the Regional Connections meeting, which is led by Regional Council and chaired by Angela Strange. We had an excellent meeting, Zoom meeting, just a week or so ago, and there was I guess a bit of a breakthrough for Waipa. So the first item on the agenda, which was a recommendation, I guess, to improving bus services between Hamilton and Cambridge, and that recommendation was approved. And what we do now is we put to, I guess, staff for Regional Council in conjunction with Waipa staff. We'll be looking at a joint route study, which will act as a roadmap, I suppose, to improve public transport between between the city and Cambridge. So really pleasing to have that as a formal recommendation. So I understand we will start to see some of the, I guess, further data and further reporting on that this side of Christmas as well. So what we have seen is, even though there's limitations with that route at the moment, I mean, you know, you can still get to, I guess, back to Cambridge or to Hamilton faster in a car than on a bus. But what it does show is that patronage is been steadily increasing. Our public want it. So what we want to do now is just provide, I suppose, more options and certainly more flexibility around that. So yeah, that's a real breakthrough for Cambridge around the public transport. And just lastly, on the event, just thought I'd touch on event cancellations and what's kind of happening in the world of events in Waipa, which, you know, a lot of our hospitality do kind of focus on and rely on. It's looking a little grim this side of Christmas. I even have events now that have cancelled for February of next year. And some might question, well, you know, why so far out? But it's the marketing and the planning that, you know, is really difficult for volunteers who are running their events. So, you know, marketing budgets can sometimes be up to, you know, $60,000, $70,000, even just for a smaller event. So if you have to commit that a month or 2 or 3 prior, of course, it's a bit off-putting to, you know, to some of those events that, you know, kind of rely on tickets and things for their income, with no certainty that the event can even go ahead. So that's just some of the background as to why we're seeing, you know, just so many cancellations, I suppose, compared to last time. And of course, the other focus is that we are going into summer, our main event season. And of course, with that uncertainty, it's just simply not viable for a lot of organisations. And Claire, I was really saddened to see that the Parongia, craft fair was cancelled. I mean, these are the sorts of events that just really disheartening, but completely understand the circumstances, and that's just where we are at the moment. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Liz. Susan.
Good morning, everybody. Just want to do a quick update in terms of the Te Awamutu Community Board. Lou and I attended two rather grueling, lengthy Te Awamutu Community Board meetings to deal with the discretionary funding round. I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but the funding allocation has changed in terms of the mechanism. We have 2 rounds now rather than the 1 in order to help us sort of balance out and make a fairer availability of that fund. Still the same amount, but it's divided across 2 funding rounds. I think we allocated somewhere in the region of about 27 or so thousand odd. That's Lush nodding his head. So yes, that's about right. So community groups in our area, we were really oversubscribed, a huge amount, more than we've ever had before, certainly in my experience on that board. So it was a pretty I think had to make some pretty tricky decisions, and unfortunately had to refuse a fair number that perhaps in the past we've been willing and keen to support. So the other news that came from those meetings was that a motion was put and carried to express the Te Awamutu Community Board's strenuous opposition to the Three Waters reform. And Lou and I just talked at length with them about what our experience has been so far in terms of the information we'd been provided, potentially some of the gaps in that knowledge, and they unanimously agreed to support that motion put by board member Derbyshire to oppose or express their opposition to that reform. So we undertook to pass that on to councillors at our first opportunity. So that's about it from me. Like everybody else, I was locked up for most of the month.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I think we're probably going to have quite a discussion on the Three Waters, obviously, later. So leave any comments to there.
I appreciate
Claire.
that.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And about the background too, I also support mental health awareness, but didn't manage it. But as I said earlier, people only have to look at me and they think about mental health all the time. I haven't been to very many things either, but did go along with Bruce to the Koramatua Hall Association AGM last night and just back up everything he said. It's a fantastic group of people that are looking after that hall in that community, and they're just so dedicated and really up with a lot of the stuff that we're doing here at council. Like they had a talk about the representation review, and they did certainly want they actually get quite a good coverage because we also have a Waikato district councillor attend as well, and we got to hear about their representation review as well and some of their initiatives to make sure that communities are having more of a say and getting what they want from council. And Liz, you mentioned the Pirongia Craft Day being cancelled, and yeah, it is quite a blow for the community. It's a massive event actually, and just for one day, but obviously just can't go ahead, under COVID conditions. And yeah, I really feel for the people who've put so much time and energy into preparing for it, and then it's going to come to nothing. We had the Pirongia Ward committee meeting as well. Like Susan, I'm touching on that because you mentioned about the discretionary grants, and we also do discretionary grants, and honestly, yeah, very much oversubscribed and a real challenge to respond to those requests and give a meaningful grant in support of the work that all of them are really highly worthy of supporting. There was an issue raised by one of the members that there's for Ohopo that there is a pedestrian crossing planned there, and we know that it's the design works going ahead with Wakakotahi. However, it wasn't even mentioned in the papers. I had a complaint from the Ohopo member, and I did actually check yeah, whether or not there was any mention, and there wasn't anything. And as he rightly claimed, why are we getting reports from staff on like transportation, for instance, and yet it's not even mentioned there, and yet it's something that's highly relevant for our community. And I do have to question, you know, why those things aren't coming to like the Pirongi Award Committee, so that those representatives of those communities are able to be informed, but also give feedback, and then be well prepared to then go back to their communities and get the word out and make sure that these initiatives are going to get the, you know, the buy-in, you know, and the involvement that we want. We want our community to know about the pedestrian crossing, and we want them to be able to see the design and maybe have some input into it. And I think that's the whole point of having the Pirongi Award Committee. So I just wanted to stress that, really. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. So Gary obviously picked that up in terms of getting the comms out, but I suppose it would suggest that at the moment, even the papers are having trouble picking up on some of the things that are going on. So I've noticed that over the COVID lockdown period, the amount of information there is dropped off. So it could have something to do with it as well. But obviously keeping the community informed is really important. So yeah, Lou, oh, sorry, Liz.
Yeah, look, just want to support Claire on that item, because obviously, yeah, I'm interested in Halpo as well. I think the communication from the staff, you know, out to the media has been very good. I've read about it everywhere. But what our community hasn't had the opportunity to do is have some input into where it could go. And all the meetings, public meetings we've had about this in the past, the message has always been the same, and it was always been very difficult to get a pedestrian crossing. So the only thing that our community has really ever asked for is some consultation prior. That's the big thing. And now it feels like the horse is bolted, and there's been no opportunity for our community to have a say. So thanks, Claire. You've been brilliant in raising this. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Lou. And I see Roger,
thank you.
I'll come to you next. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honour. I just quietly was very much along with Susan. We went to the community board, of course. They've also done a submission on the representation, which both Susan and I sort of stepped out of a little bit, but they're going to present that. The other thing was they had a discussion on the Rātatu Reserve. There's a little bit of an extra discussion on that. But one of the things that came from the community board was that they believe that their relevance, and they wanted to have more say in what we're doing. And so both of us as councillors will probably present a little bit more of what they're saying to you, so that it has got a channel of communication, perhaps. That's what they're asking us to do. Go back to where I wanted to be. Unfortunately, like everyone, we've had a major reunion actually cancel on us. We were having that in Te Amutu, hosted by the RSA, with over 200 persons arriving. It unfortunately is gone because of COVID. We've had to reschedule Anzac Armistice Day. We're now talking of Armistice Day on the 14th, Sunday the 14th of November, not the 11th. Now, the reason for that is that unfortunately our head office is having a major conference down in Wellington where we've all got to attend. So unfortunately, we're going to have our Armistice Day on a Sunday, but hopefully it'll work well for us. And it doesn't actually align. We actually made sure it doesn't combine or confer against Cambridge. So 1 week afterwards. And the final thing I'd like to say is we had a meeting with urban miners, and our e-waste collection is going ahead on Sunday at the Te Amutu Sports Car Park for anybody that's got some e-waste. So we start at 9 a.m. in the morning, finish at 11 a.m. and invite people that have got e-waste to come along. We'll be collecting at that time and operating as normal. And we're tracking with the meeting, we actually have organised that we're going to have a regular monthly collections, both in Cambridge and in Te Amutu. So that's all been organised.
Thanks, Lou. It's with the marketing, and I see some signs have gone up for the e-waste. Is there any information coming out on the charges for dropping off that e-waste? Because I know that there's a charge required. Roger, you got some info there?
Yeah, I have. Thank you, Mayor Jim. As you know, I'm a member of Rotary. The urban miners have got a website, and all of the charges for the individual items of e-waste are clearly identified on a chart there on their website. So if you do a Google search for urban miners Cambridge, that website will come up. Can I do my...
Yeah, sure. I just checked that Lou had finished, Roger.
Sorry, Lou, have you finished?
Just quickly, I can actually scan that. I've got copies of it here, and give it to Joe or someone to circulate if people are interested. That's the prices for e-waste.
Yeah, it was more making sure that the public were aware that they didn't turn up thinking it was being collected for nothing effectively. So, yeah, that was just a concern. Susan?
Can I also add it's on the Urban Miners Facebook page as well. They circulate it quite regularly when they advertise them there. So it is quite regularly broadcast on those channels.
Yeah, thanks, Susan.
So is it cash or FPOS as well, Lou, for that event? Because I'd quite like to do some marketing about it too on Facebook.
Yes, we do have FPOS, Marcus, and we do actually accept anything from cash to FPOS.
Roger.
Yeah, good. Yes, thank you, Mayor Jim. A couple of meetings that I attended that have already been mentioned, but worthwhile just registering that I was at them, and that's the regional transport meeting. Very pleased, as Liz said, that the question of public transport in Cambridge is being addressed. And I got the idea that that was going to be over a reasonably small time frame. So really, we should get something out there, Liz, I think by the end of the year, was it not? So that's really positive. Certainly the Cambridge Health and Wellness Zoom meetings that we've been having have been really good to keep up with how the different areas of our community are handling the lockdown. I attended by Zoom again the Streets for People review, which really pleased with the outcome of that, and particularly as we saw in last week's meeting, the urban mobility two committees that have been set up, which is really good going forward. Again, with joining with Mike on tonight's meeting for Three Waters, I think at this stage as well, just to mention the AGM of the Cambridge Heritage Charity Trust, which Mike and I joined, and I think we've had a notification that's gone out about the unfortunate decision to wind up that trust, which is a bit unfortunate, but that was a decision that had to be made. So that's my update. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. I think I've just about got everyone.
Jim, can I? I
yeah,
did forget something. There's the Kihi residents, and well, it's a whole Kihi community are having a day. It's just for all of the on Sunday at 10 from 10 till 2 o'clock out at the Kihi domain. But it's called a connecting day, and it's for all the groups to put out their stands and to connect with each other. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, and it's on Sunday at the Kihi domain. I forgot about that. Sorry.
Thanks, Hazel. Okay. Oh, Gary.
Thank you, Worship. Dawn Ingalls is here, and she is able to close the loop for the councillors on the or pedestrian crossing issue.
Oh, thanks, Gary. Dawn.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. And yeah, with respect to the design for that, so where the pedestrian crossing is proposed, it's State Highway 3. And so they were kind of the first party that we had to start consultation with, and to do that we had to kind of work through and come up with a straw man. So that's why it looks relatively well developed in terms of the concept plan that we have, so that we could get the agency, Waka Kotahi, to give us that go ahead. Certainly not presenting the information at the Parongia Ward Committee was an oversight, and certainly apologise for that. There is a bit of a timing issue in terms of the agency sign off and then us allowing us to move forward. So whilst it looks that we are producing something that's quite well developed, we're now moving into that phase of getting community feedback, and we'll certainly engage with the various parties. So apologies for that, but as I say, we had to be very careful working through the state highway issues.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks,
I really
Dawn.
appreciate that. Yeah, and it's good to hear that consultation with the community is planned. Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, well, what does that community consultation look like, Dawn? Like, can we help in some way?
Absolutely. We're just working through that comms plan at the moment. So as soon as we've got that available, we'll share it and just check in that we've got every base covered. Yeah,
lovely. Thanks, Dawn. Brilliant.
All right. Okay. All right. Hey, well, thank you for that. Look, from my perspective, apart from the Zoom meetings, I've been trying to keep away from any public gatherings that might risk breaching the lockdown measures. Suppose I don't really want to get the media coverage buying an ice cream without a mask on, or going for a paddle in the ocean. But I think it behoves us all just to be careful and probably set as good an example as we can, because we've really got to get on top of COVID if we want the country to get back moving again. So anything we can do to promote vaccinations so that we don't have to go into lockdowns are a really good step forward, I think. So and hopefully if we can get that done before Christmas, some of those events over the summer might still be able to go ahead. Look, my time's been pretty well tied up with the Three Waters reform. We're going to have that discussion later on. But just quickly, the meeting that Dawn and I attended in Taupo last week, I think it was, with the 22 other councils in the Entity B area. It was, I suppose, a day's discussion on how to communicate back to central government without actually making a commitment or actually saying anything. But it was clear that the majority of councils still have major issues with the reform as it's being proposed. But there's differing opinions. So how we're going to get a collective view from those 22, let alone across the country, is going to be a real challenge, I think. But look, we'll have that discussion later on. Dawn, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything on the meeting in Taupo? No. So it's certainly worthwhile going. Everybody was approaching it from a positive perspective in terms of wanting to improve our water supplies and the environmental outcomes with sewage and stormwater. But I'd have to say there was probably an overwhelming lack of support for the proposition being put forward by central government. So, yeah, some more vehemently opposed than others. But anyway, so look, if there's no other comments on that item, we're on to item 6 now, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the 31st of August. And can I have a mover and a seconder to receive those? Philip and Roger, all those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. So just going through those minutes, were there any, if we go through them, page 2 of 14, there's nothing on the first page. 3, 4, 5, 6, anyone? 7?
Jim, there's something on page 7.
Yep, thanks, Claire.
Yeah, so it's the iwi Consultative Committee item, and it's the second to last paragraph, and the second line says the representative for Ngāti Hikairo, and in June 2021, I think an email of resignation was received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So change Anne to Anne. Yeah, thanks, Claire.
Thanks.
Nothing else on that page. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 is just the signature page. So we've done really well. If that's the only alteration or correction that we needed, just to drop a D off. So with those really minor changes, is everyone or someone happy to move it's a true and correct record? Claire and Lou, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. We're now on to item 7, Audit and Risk Committee. Gary, were you, or was it Ken leading this?
Your Worship, Jenny Wilson is here to present the report on the summary of what happened at Audit and Risk on Monday last week. Thank you.
Hand over to you, Jenny.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll take the report as read. It's and the salient points have been pulled out. One thing that was a key point of discussion was out of the ARC survey, how we engage with all of council about these meetings. And you'll see there were a lot of appendices included this time. So the Appendix 2 is the top risks. That's after our annual refresh. So those are the 14 top risks that will prevent us achieving our objectives. Appendix 3 is the risk appetite statement. Now that is portfolio based, and we have added the portfolio for fraud and bribery and corruption as suggested by our internal auditors after the last audit. And that appetite statement has also been refreshed. And Appendix 4 is the quarterly risk report. Now that's a key discussion document at Audit and Risk, and it also includes compliance information by exception, and it is worthwhile reading. And then finally, Appendix 6 is the ARC survey results. They show a consolidation and were generally positive, but as I said earlier, there was discussion about engaging all of council. And whilst we've provided the key documents as part of this communication, we're also interested in feedback from council, well, from the elected members, as to how we could improve the communications about what goes on at Audit and Risk. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Everybody happy with the report and all of the appendices? Ken, did you want to comment?
No, Your Worship. I think Jeannie has covered it very well. Well, actually, probably is just one thing I would just mention. So the top risks. I believe that was Appendix 2. I think there was some talk at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting last week that that if councillors wanted to spend a bit of time going through those risks, perhaps in a workshop session at some point in the near future, there was some suggestion that if that was something that there was interest in, we would be more than happy to arrange that. That would be the likes of Jeannie and George, just so I suppose cutting some time to maybe just spend an hour talking through those top risks. So Your Worship, perhaps if there is any interest in that, perhaps that could be expressed now and that could be arranged. Otherwise, the document is pretty much a standalone document and has a lot of detail in it. If that's sufficient, then that's fine as well.
Ken, Graham, I think that'd be a great idea. They were very, very busy, those graphs, a lot to take in. Just an explanation from various points and getting together would be great. let's hope we can do it after COVID when we can sit around the council table. The only other thing I'd like to make comment on, we've got 2 proposals of a 9% increase in our audit fees, and I see that there were no questions raised by the committee, and I was wondering why that was, because in today's low inflation environment, that seems to be pretty damn tall order. But Ken, obviously you've got a bit of information because you were sort of feeling comfortable with what they were proposing. Thanks.
Yeah. So through your worship, shall I answer that question?
Certainly.
Yeah. That's fine. Hey, so Graham, we did while I don't think there was any actual questions on that matter, certainly there was a bit of discussion, and I spent quite a bit of time at the meeting, actually taking the meeting through, what the drivers of those increases were, because yes, at face value, 9% increases, 2 sets of 9% increases year on year is pretty alarming. But look, the context for that is the Auditor General. So actually, the Auditor General, rather than Audit New Zealand, has been saying for a couple of years that he is concerned that the audit fees that are set within the local government sector, and I think some of the other public type sector, sectors in New Zealand, those audit fees are not recovering the true costs of the audit. So we have had John Ryan, the Auditor General, saying that for a couple of years. Audit New Zealand as well, when you think about it, I mean, essentially what they are is a professional services firm. So their core cost is in their staffing, and look, they are really under pressure in their staffing at the moment. So historically they've relied on importing in young professionals from England and South Africa and Australia and places like that. Of course, COVID borders closed has meant they haven't been able to do that. So so in fact they actually indicated that about 40% of those increases related to escalating salary costs that they have had to incur just to keep their staffing in place. And then I think the third factor is that these fees are not just set by Leon, our local auditor. These fees go through quite a significant national moderation process. So look, I am confident that our local auditors couldn't set a fee that's out of kilter with the rest of the country. So look, those things were all explained at the Audit and Risk Committee, and therefore the fees were agreed to.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Graham. Mike.
Yeah, just to support what Ken said there through the Mayor, in the education sector too, which of course is the public sector, the increase was around 9% too, and they've given us our fees for the next 3 years. So look, I think it is in line there. The amount of work they do, the fees, at least at our level, don't seem a lot. So we weren't really surprised to see an increase either. So yeah, it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. And certainly, Graham, it was a concern, but it was well explained, I suppose. So it probably explains the lack of questions. But and Bruce Robertson certainly confirmed that it was in order, I suppose. So yeah, a bit of a challenge. Ken.
Yeah. So through your worship, just picking up on Graham's first item. So we can certainly look to organise a workshop pretty much around those top risks. If we can sort of arrange that for when you guys are back in the chambers, we'll do that. But within the next month or so, we'll look to organise a workshop session.
Thanks, Ken. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks for that. So we have a recommendation there that just to receive the report. Mike, happy to move, and Bruce second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. The RMA delegations. Gary, who's handling this one? Oh, Diana, is it?
Thank you, Worship. Diana and Tony Quickfall are here to present this item to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tēnā koutou katoa, your councillors. Today, I have the RMA report, and we're basically seeking your approval to a number of amendments to council delegations to staff. This followed a quite an in-depth review that we undertook of the RMA delegations, basically going through section by section to making sure that current delegations we had were still fit for purpose. So we're proposing a number of changes just to provide greater clarity of the scope of the delegations, also to ensure that the delegations are to the correct staff members and the staff roles, and to ensure that the overall delegations are comprehensive enough to ensure that they're appropriately delegated to ensure the most efficient, effective use of the different functions. I haven't gone through in the paper line by line an explanation of each one because there are quite a few amendments, but they are all outlined in track changes in Appendix 2 to the report. But I'm very happy to take any questions you might have on any of the proposed amendments.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. Tony, did you want to add anything before I go to questions?
The only thing I'd add, Your Worship, is it was a thorough tidy up, I guess is the way to describe it. So we went through line by line the RMA delegations, and there were some things that needed a bit of tidy up. So really no substantive changes other than bringing some additional delegations on and taking some off that weren't needed. So just to tidy up. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. A fairly major tidy up by the look at all those red lines going through the report. Looks like one of my essays at school, or the red marks. Were there any questions anyone had? It's technical changes, so unless there's anyone's gone through with any more detail, is everyone happy with that? Okay, Roger, were you moving? Yep, and a seconder, Marcus. So that was the resolution A through to C. All those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Item 9 is the report on the dog control policy.
Thank you, Worship. So annually we're required to report to central government on our dog control policy and practices. Carl Tati is here to speak to his report.
Carl.
Yeah, good morning. More of a supporting role this morning. Helen McLean's going to lead the report, and I'll be in the background for any questions that might arise.
G'day, Helen. Thanks, Carl.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So the Dog Control Act requires all councils to report annually to the Department of Internal Affairs on all our dog control practices. So basically there's two parts. Part 1 is the activities and practices, and then part 2 is all the statistics on our dog numbers, complaint types, and the enforcement measures that we've taken, which is pretty much, it's exactly the same as what's provided in the District Growth Quarterly Report as well. So I'll take the report as read, but if there's any questions, just ask away.
Any questions from the councillors?
Jim, I've got a question, please.
Yes, Claire.
Thanks, Helen. I noticed that on page 5 of your report that I'm just trying to see, that's on page 138 of our agenda. It's paragraph 2.6. It's mentioned that we submitted feedback to the Associate Minister for the Local Government about infringement notices being available as, for minor attacks. I'm sure Carl recalls this actually, just to give us more enforcement options. Because it means, because we don't have that tool, we are actually classifying more dogs as menacing. I think it'd be a really good idea to highlight in the executive summary that we haven't had a response to it, because it's sort of in the body of the report, but I'm pretty disappointed that it hasn't been taken up by central government, and it's just a way of sort of making sure that they realise that we're still anxious to have more of these options available. I don't know if things have changed since then, Carl, but I just thought it'd be good to include it in the executive summary.
yeah, we can definitely move that around. There certainly hasn't been any progress in that space that I'm aware of.
Yeah, thanks.
No, and I think that's something that the Institute is very keen to have a part in as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty sad to have a dog classified as menacing, because you know, if there was an alternative that would have been workable, it wouldn't have been classified in that way. Yeah,
for sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. I think I made a comment last year with this report that it's another one of these ones that seems to disappear into a black hole, and there's no feedback from central government on that. Do we get any comments back at all? Is there a summary of across the country how things are going? Is there a change needed for some of the, I suppose, the significant issues in terms of dangerous dogs, etc., that is happening, or is it just a statutory requirement to report all of these statistics and then nothing happens?
Pretty much, yeah. We certainly haven't heard anything back, no. All the information's available on individual council websites, but yeah, we don't hear any significant information back.
Thanks, Helen.
Helen, can I just ask a question to the Dog Controlling Authority? I'm biking a lot on our trails, and there's a hell of a lot of people who do not have their dogs on a leash. And it is really, really difficult when you're approaching someone. The dog gets called by its owner, then it sees a bike coming, and it doesn't know which way to go. And I've ended up with one dog under my front wheel, and luckily I was nearly stopped. But I just wondered if there's some chance for the council to do some more paintings on the walkway, cycleway. There's some signs, but just need reminding. And also, I think going out to the Avani drone, we're in desperate need of a doggy do bin. I know there's an issue about how do I collect it, but a lot of the doggy doos are getting left on posts and plastic bags. It's not a nice scene.
Right, dear. Yeah, that's a pretty constant request that we get from all bins, I know for sure. And you know, it's something we're always considering, and where the best places are to place those. So for sure we'll like that. But we'd quite like to do some more monitoring over the summer months too, and potentially after hours, because I think a lot of these things do tend to happen outside normal council hours.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Just carrying on from the Graham and the doggy do bins, there's been a request along the new cycle track at the Oaks and Resthaven way at Payne Park. So I believe Carl's working on that for us as well too. So, but it takes, you can just getting a bin is the easy thing. It's servicing it. You know, that's an adjustment to the contract and what have you. So, yeah.
For sure.
Thanks.
The costs in relation to that contract have increased quite significantly lately as well, which sort of detracts from being able to supply all of the new bins. But we've got a list of, well, we get a new request for a bin probably every fortnight, so we've got quite a list to work through once we've gone through our next budget round.
It's like all rubbish bins, isn't it? If people create the rubbish, if we provide bins, they'll use them. Otherwise, they should take it home. Anyway, any other questions?
Good report. Very good.
Thanks, Helen, Carl. So we've got the recommendation there, A and B. They're going to have the mover and a seconder, please. Graham and Bruce. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Okay, so in our agenda now, we've got a break for morning tea. It's a little bit early, but I think it's probably appropriate to have a 10-minute break now, because the next item might generate quite a bit of discussion. So I'd suggest it's 9:55 now. Coming back at 10:10. Does that suit everybody?
Great.
Just have a quick break.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Still just waiting for a few to get back on.
Jim, I was just going to say it's really been quite interesting, the number of the public that are tremendously interested in this water reform and have got a lot to say about it. And the more I read through the feedback that we've got here, you know, it's how we're going to put all of those, you know, the community comment together, because yeah, and you know, it's very seldom I can go shopping, which I haven't been doing, of course, for the last month, but nonetheless, people going for walking, if I happen to be out in the garden, they'll stop and have a yarn over the gate, and it's about the three waters, which really interests me, that some people that you wouldn't think would be making a comment have got plenty of comment to make.
Yeah, Hazel, we'll have that discussion shortly, I've no doubt, but just waiting for everyone to get back online. So,
oh, I was just making a comment.
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah, no,
I'll be
it's all right.
listening to what everybody's got to say when we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. But certainly the biggest issue that I've had in terms of number of people contacting me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, just Susan, are you there at the moment? And
I'm
Phil?
here.
Yep, and Philip, are you back? Are you there, Philip? Well, it's 3 minutes past the time when we said we'd reconvene, so I would imagine Philip will be back shortly. Okay, so we'll reconvene the meeting after that short break, and we're on to item 10, the feedback to Local Government New Zealand on the three waters. And I did mention to Dawn that it's not only feedback to Local Government New Zealand, it's feedback to the DIA as well. So we just need to tidy that up, and I'm sure Dawn will comment on that as we go through the discussions. So, and as I mentioned earlier on in the meeting, it's certainly the reforms are creating quite a stir across the country. And I suppose from my perspective, the comment that is often touted out at the beginning of the discussion is that everybody agrees that there's need for a change. And I find that almost insulting, I suppose, in that if you say you don't think there's a need for change, the criticism is you're burying your head in the sand. But I think local government across New Zealand has been changing continuously and improving the standards of their infrastructure and their supplies, but obviously not fast enough. And a lot of that is down to funding and financing. And for as long as I can remember, councils have been asking for a reform on how a number of our functions are funded, rather than just property taxes. So look, I think everybody is definitely open for change, and we all want to achieve the same result, which is better drinking water and a better environmental outcomes, both from a sewerage and a stormwater disposal situation. So look, at the moment, Gary, I don't know whether you want to make any introductory comments, or we hand over straight to Dawn, go through the report that Dawn has provided for us, and then I'll open it up for questions. And it's probably easier, Dawn, for you to go through your report, and then we'll have questions at the end, I would suggest. Is that everyone comfortable with that? Yeah, Gary, did you want to comment?
Oh, no introduction required from me, Your Worship.
Okay, Dawn, hand it over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Your Worship. I have put together just a few slides as a bit of an introduction, so if I might just share that now. I'm sort of acknowledged the report is quite long, and so I'm taking it as read. But yeah, just wanted to sort of, I guess, highlight a few key areas. So we obviously had our workshop a fortnight ago, and in the report is a submission to the government's proposal that's based on feedback coming through that. And as Your Worship, as you noted, in the last fortnight, the Three Waters Steering Committee have advised that they would like us to direct our submission to both LGNZ and back to the DIA. So just a reminder of the process where we find ourselves in this 8-week feedback period, that it's feedback on the proposal from the government, getting that feedback back by the end of this week. And the government, the most recent information I saw was yesterday, where it was indicated that a government decision will be made in October. But whether that was sort of going to be realised or not, because there's obviously going to be a lot of information for the DIA and government officials to work through. I also note that last week there were a number of media statements made by a DIA representative saying that the DIA people were looking at forming a working group of elected members to re-look at the governance framework and looking at the proposal and that very complex diagram that had been included within the proposal. So that's certainly interesting in terms of the concerns that have been raised across the country around that are being acknowledged and responded to. So just to confirm, in terms of the basis of the proposal that we are providing, and it's on this basis that the Appendix 8 to the report has been prepared, very much on our previous discussions. Your Worship, you noted earlier the entity B Hui held last week, and we shared the report, which was the survey across those 22 entities, and the draft letter that was going to be sent off this week. Also last week, a further document was released, was the Stormwater technical report, and there's still debate sort of going on as to whether this is a 3-water reform proposal or a 2-water reform proposal, and certainly that indicated that the technical group was saying that this should be a 3-water proposal, even though stormwater has such a significant impact in terms of our land use and strategic land use planning across the district. Also following up on Councillor O'Regan's earlier update from the Te Awamutu Community Board, I thought it was just acknowledging the resolution that arose from that meeting, and that was that the Te Awamutu Community Board recommend that Council retain complete control of the district water assets and reject the government's current 3 waters proposal to acquire these assets. This slide I didn't update, so but providing numbers from late yesterday, we were still getting quite a bit of feedback emails coming in late yesterday. So as of the 27th of September, we had 115 pieces of feedback from the community, 105 who did not support the reforms. Although I've got to note that 2 of those who did not support the reforms did note that they agreed with the new compliance regulator of Taumata Arawai, and said that that was needed within the sector. The 6 who supported the reforms and the 4 unsure, so those numbers were the same. So alongside this process, obviously we've been receiving this feedback, and the key themes that I've been sharing with you were along the lines that Waipa does manage its water services really, really well. So why are we looking to change? Local is better, not necessarily bigger is better. Concerns around the loss of assets and risks around cross-subsidisation. The governance model as proposed was not trusted by our community. Significant concerns around the lack of true consultation on the reform program, and many people calling for a referendum. Some commentary in that waters should, so this was something that came through from someone who supported the reforms, saying that waters funding should come from taxpayers, not just from ratepayers, given the environmental benefits that would be seen from the reform program, but also a lot of commentary that this was all happening far too quickly for people.
Do you want to get another slide? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Sorry, so yeah, just in summary, the draft submissions covers off these 4 areas. And whilst the recommendation from the report was that Mr. Diet would sign the submission, one of the recommendations subsequently arising is that in fact both His Worship and Gary sign off this submission before it is made. So just wanted to cover off that. So the only other slide is, Your Worship, I brought in the your suggested commentary. So I've got that on a slide if you wish to speak to that at all.
Yeah, that would be helpful, Dawn. So I circulated this to the councillors yesterday, and I just, I suppose, felt that we should be making the point that we support government endeavours to resolve iwi Maori rights and interests in water, but using community assets to satisfy a Crown responsibility is not appropriate. Local government, to my understanding, is not a party to the treaty, and to try and bring in 50% ownership control, whatever you want to call it, for Maori is something that the Crown needs to resolve, and not using community assets. So I felt that was an important point to make, and I just wanted to firm up the summary of the draft that Dawn had put forward, and just make sure that it was abundantly clear that we don't support the reforms in their present form. So that was just a suggestion that I had, and I know that a number of councillors may well have a lot of other comments to make, and Claire has certainly circulated to me. I'm not sure whether it went to everybody her views as well, but look, that was just a point that I thought we should be making. Thanks, Dawn. So can we go back to the full screen?
Absolutely.
So questions or comments, questions to Dawn or Gary, and then and any comments anybody has. And
I'd like to say I agree with your comments and your email that you sent around yesterday, Jim. That's certainly where I'm feeling with your statement.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. So Claire, I see your hand up, and then Councillor O'Regan. Susan?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Firstly, I want to thank Gary and Dawn and the others on the team for the material that we've got. Like, I do really appreciate the effort that's been put in to summarise things, and it was great to get that survey from the Entity 2 people to read as well, that Morris and Lowe did. And it's really helped clarify things, I felt. So I did circulate, and I also agree completely with what you circulated, Jim, yesterday. And I think it's a really important point to make about the interests and rights of iwi, and how it seems to be using community assets to try and resolve what is really a treaty issue, I think. So I've got some other points that I wanted to make, particularly around the funding tools that we have, because I do feel that that's been a failing of central government, that we've requested these things, but we haven't been given them. And so the two that I highlighted and what I circulated was the revenue bonds, which was mentioned in the Castalia reports. So it is a legitimate funding option, and it's used successfully overseas, where those loans aren't counted as part of a council's external debt, and so they don't need to be taken into account when you're working with your caps and your limits or your credit ratings with rating agencies and things like that. And the second example I gave was green financing, where in this, we're heading towards carbon zero net emissions, that where you've got carbon credits, the savings that are made with the new wastewater treatment plants, as we're seeing with the Cambridge one that's proposed, it actually provides a significant funding stream that would really reduce the burden on ratepayers for financing these improvements. Now, if that business is taken away from councils and put with a water entity, we have no idea whether or not they would make use of those carbon credits. And in fact, it could be argued that if we do have that tool available, communities could probably afford to do these upgrades and not go through this really huge upheaval that's being proposed. I'm also not really comfortable at all, actually, about the stormwater being included. I just feel it's not been thought through enough yet. It's so complex and convoluted, and I don't think we're ready to do that yet. I do think it's underbaked at the moment. So those are my main comments.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And look, I really support your positive approach to how we can redesign the reforms. But I think at the moment we're probably in a position of letting the government know fairly clearly that we don't support the reforms in their present format, and we want to have a discussion with central government, that's Count Waipā and local government New Zealand, and actually have a hand in actually designing a package that would actually be practical and work and wouldn't be wasting a whole heap of money. So just wondering at the moment whether we get into the details on I suppose a new proposal, rather than just saying at the moment there is no support for the reform package that's in front of us.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with that approach, in that we want to make it clear that we don't support the proposal in its current form. I'm just really concerned that if we don't push for these additional financing tools, it's going to take a long time to get them in place. Like, we're wanting to build the new Cambridge wastewater treatment plant. We'll start, in the next year, I suppose, or even have it finished, is it by 2025 or 2026? And so we need those tools right now. Like, I know it was raised through the Productivity Commission's report on the transition to low emissions economy, which was done, like, I was working on it in 2017, 2018, and there's no sign of any of these tools coming through. That's all.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair comment. Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Look, I totally agree with the suggested amendments, Jim, that you've made. And Claire, I really acknowledge and respect some of the alternative funding models and approaches that you think have been missed, and I definitely agree with you. I think it's a way forward. And I just following on from what you just said there, Jim, my understanding from the LGNZ document was that this period of time was given to us to identify issues of local concern, provide feedback on those, and suggestions of how the proposal could be strengthened. And I guess the question is whether are we looking at strengthening the current proposal, or are we actually rejecting the current proposal and saying that there are alternatives out there? So I don't propose I'm going to resolve that, but I suppose that's kind of where we're sitting. I guess from where I sit, and I'm sorry, I have made a few notes, so it might sound a little bit wooden, but I've while this proposal might not be entirely clear, what has been pretty clear is what is known by this table and by the communities in our efforts to try and get some feedback from them, is that they actually are opposed to it. And it's an unequivocal opposition in my view. I accept that 91% of the feedback that we've managed to glean from our website as an opposition, but I can tell you wholeheartedly, and I'm sure many of you are the same, that you've pretty much had 100% opposition to you directly. My inbox has been flooded. My messenger has been going bananas, particularly over the last week, probably with the whole issue coming to a greater, more media attention and what have you. So I think that 91% is probably a little bit on the softer side. I would think it's probably a really overwhelming opposition in our communities. And I acknowledge the appendix we have there. I agree with it as far as it goes, including those amendments that Jim has proposed. But I don't know if it goes far enough to express our real overwhelming opposition as an elected membership and as people representing the thoughts of our community. And I know that we've been told we're not allowed to consult, it's not time, but let's be fair, let's be honest. We have received an overwhelming no, not now, too fast, don't like it kind of response from our community. So I think the subtlety of the wording in that appendix fails to encapsulate that real opposition. And so I support what we've got there, but I just want it I'd like it to sound more oppositional if that's at all possible, because it's not just, oh, we're not really liking it much. It's actually a real dislike, and I accept we're not in a position now to opt in or out. That's not really where we're at in that space, but I think the language could be changed such that it's a very clear rejection of the proposal as it currently stands, as we understand it to be. I guess from my perspective, I personally would like to go a step further. This may not find any support around our table, but I want to express some frustration with this entire process. I'm really disappointed that initially what was it, last November, when we started having our meetings with DIA, there seemed to be a real desire for there to be a consultative and a cooperative partnership-based approach, as it was touted as being. And I guess originally the timeframes and the timelines set out were really transparent, and I felt like we were actually being involved. But I suspect that good faith was probably eroded quite significantly with that very expensive and insulting advertising campaign. And then we moved into a phase where everything became very much a spoon-fed or drip-fed information, need to know, process, which didn't fill me with lots of confidence and lots of belief that we were working in partnership with them, despite the media or their collateral insisting that was the case. So I suspect that there's been quite an erosion of confidence in that relationship, and that doesn't bode well for making sound decisions going forward. This reform process was launched in July last year. It's only 14 months ago. This is a major intergenerational project of such significance and change about something that's such a fundamental resource necessary to sustain human life and activity. And I just feel it's way too rushed. And that bears out from a lot of the comments that other councils have expressed in the last day or so, a call to slow down, a call to approach this in a manner that requires a lot more agreement across the board, because this is going to be hard to push through in sight of such opposition across all councils, give or take one or two, and in the face of overwhelming community opposition in terms of what's known so far. And I accept that there is an ability there for the government to pass enabling legislation, but I think it would be unwise. I think they need to sit back and we need to slow down and get greater buy-in. So that's sort of my little lecture. That's how I see it. I mean, a lot more other things I wanted to say, but I think that kind of it is in a nutshell. So if we can kind of toughen up some of the wording in our appendix, Appendix 8, in terms of our submission, I would be really supportive. But yeah, I agree with Claire's comments to Dawn. Really good summary of the journey we've travelled so far, and I really appreciated the work that went into that. So thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Who's would like to comment next? Roger, and then Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jim. And firstly, well done, Dawn, for putting that paper together. I'm really pleased, Jim, that we've brought this onto the agenda on a public meeting and included Dawn's paper as a public document, because I think that really shows our community the challenges that we've got, and certainly the inclusion of the community feedback at the end of your report, Dawn, that mirrors a lot of what my concerns are. And so, yeah, I'm really pleased about that. In Susan's comments, Susan, I support your comment, definitely. I'd prefer to see us going out with something a little bit stronger and saying that we just don't agree with what these changes are. Jim, with your suggested change, I agree totally that government should not be using third-party assets to try to address the Maori rights to water. But just in your first lead into that to comment to say we support government's move to resolve Maori rights. Well, if you look at Nanaia Mahuta's paper to the Cabinet, I can't support that paper to Cabinet because that really suggests Maori ownership of water, and I'm not in favour of that at all. So those are my views. Yep.
Yep. Thanks, Roger. I suppose I was getting not necessarily saying the position that we're taking, other than to say the government needs to sort it out, not through this process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the word support. It's just the word support that I have a challenge with in
okay.
Your suggestion.
We can tidy that up. Andrew.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And again, I also would like to compliment Dawn on a very comprehensive report that provides a lot of information, and also, like Roger, I'm very happy that all that is out in the public domain, although I believe the vast majority of it was already public. Yeah, Susan, I agree with a lot of your comments. And I also agree, Jim, with the proposal that you put forward. But what I am very concerned about is that we are conveniently forgetting the reason for this proposed reforms by the government, and that is efficiencies and lower costs to our water-connected ratepayers. And to me, that you know, we have a responsibility to look after the financial, I suppose, costs that our ratepayers are going to incur in receiving their water, and this is to me really important. We're kind of presuming that Waipa District Council will be able to achieve the efficiencies and cost structures that Entity B is projected to achieve, and I don't think that's realistic. So while the government proposal needs a lot of work, there's no two ways about it, and yes, it's rushed, and yes, would have been very much better if the reports on the reform of local government had preceded this. You know, I think it behooves us to really consider the financial and efficiency implications that the government proposals, and those proposals don't come from politicians. I've said this before, they come from water engineers, experts in the field who know what they're talking about. We ignore that sort of stuff at our peril, in my view. So yeah, they're my comments. But again, really well done, Dawn, to you and your team. That's a great report.
Andrew, can I just go back onto the efficiency argument a little bit, because I agree that, and look, that's why we all put our hands up to be on the council, look after the best interests of our community. But it's not from my point of view, it's not just driven by efficiency. Obviously, we've got to do the best job that we can, but the community actually don't want necessarily the cheapest outcome. And I always reflect on the fact that our community, our two main towns are only 20 minutes apart. You can, on an efficiency argument alone, you could argue that we only need one swimming pool and one library situated somewhere within the district, because the access is easy. But the community tell us loud and clear that convenience and equity in access and those sorts of things are important as well. And it's not just a straight dollar discussion, I suppose, in terms of the making it more acceptable, I suppose, to the community. So I always come back to the fact that yes, you can argue the efficiency, but you lose the effectiveness, and I just see rural and provincial New Zealand in particular just losing out more and more with the centralisation that's going on, and that you can always support centralising services based on an efficiency perspective, but that doesn't necessarily build the communities that we want. So that's where I sit on it. So yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I certainly agree with you when you're talking about the swimming pools, but I think that's a totally different case. And it sort of comes back to the whole ownership question that we've tossed around a little bit. You know, to say that the ratepayers or even water-connected ratepayers own our water assets is just wrong, in my view. It's a very strange kind of ownership that means that if you move out of the district, you do not receive any compensation for those assets that you've paid for over the time that you've been connected to water. What the ratepayers or water-connected ratepayers are actually purchasing is simply the delivery of the water systems, wastewater, stormwater. The local authority, Waipa District Council, certainly they own, or we own, those water assets. The ratepayers don't. What the ratepayers are really interested in is the delivery, and it's just going to be delivered better by entity B than it can be by Waipa District Council. And I just don't see where the concern about control is in respect of you know, new subdivisions or whatever. We will be a, excuse me, that's the cat. We will be a customer of this new entity who will be able to more efficiently provide, utilise the current providers that are already there, all those contractors. It just, yeah, there's no concern in my view about this control aspect. In fact, we will be all better off, quite clearly in my view. So yeah, I don't think those concerns, Jim, are valid in this instance.
Okay, we might have to agree to disagree on that one, Andrew. Mike.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Utopia must be a beautiful place to live in. Hey, I've got a couple of comments. There's so much to take in that it's actually a bit like Susan probably. It's actually, I find it difficult to get everything I'm thinking across because it is very complex. But that Taumata Arawai, the new water service entity, I mean, I guess what everyone does agree is the current standards are going to change. So there's no issue there, and that's going to happen very, very soon, and they're going to resource that. And the standards that we currently have are not going to be there around down the track. So water across the whole country and the quality of it is going to have to increase. So I don't think probably many of us would disagree with that. What I take a little bit, well, no, what I disagree with is that I don't think this is just about the experts coming up with there needs to be change. This, to me, is absolutely interwoven with a political decision. This is a need based on increasing quality that the government have come up with, and that's their right through taumata arawai. But it's also, in my mind, also politically driven. And that's just, if it's the elephant in the room, it's the elephant in the room. But the taking this away from council control and effectively giving it to an entity that is massively disproportionately constructed in terms of the makeup of that governance group is something I don't think this country has seen. Well, it probably has, but not public like this. So I think one's got their head in the sand if they don't think this could have major impact. Te Ao Māori world is not the world I grew up in. I know a little bit about it, but it's not my world, and I have absolute respect for it. But I would want to know how that world really is going to impact on a New Zealand world, and Aotearoa world. And Te Ao Māori, it's not something I've got enough knowledge of to understand how they may influence water in this country. Now, the chances are it could be very, very positive. But I guess my main message is not asking that change doesn't need to happen. What we're asking for is Taiho government, step back, take your time, don't just focus on the next election. It's better to get this right together as a nation, and everyone in this nation, not just parts of it, whether politically, ethnic-based, but getting this right together and getting a system that is going to last forever, not last election cycles before the next government legislates to change it. So look, I'm not opposed to change at all, and I've said that before. I mean, I'm in a position where change is constant. I just don't think this is very well managed change at all. And the strong message that needs to go through, and Councillor Regan formed it, is that I am strongly opposed to the currently what's been put forward, because I think it needs more time to be explored, not because changes need to happen. It is getting the right change for New Zealand Aotearoa.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments? Liz?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Hey, I just want to come back to the feedback that we're going to send through to central government. So Appendix 8, which I think Appendix 8 is going to become quite famous around our table. And when I take a look at what the community has been telling me over I guess several weeks, and I've read and I've reread Appendix 8, and I still feel it's close to being reflective of what our community is, and reading I have done, but it's probably just still too soft. When I look at all the information that's out there in the public arena, we've seen lots of advertisements on TV. So our public are reasonably informed, actually, and there's a lot of information or access to information. And for me, overwhelmingly, the message is really, really clear. Our communities really just don't want to see a handover of our community assets. That seems to be the biggest issue that I've had emailed and voiced to me, is around around the assets. That it appears that we don't have at this point a really clear view of who is going to own them and how that's going to work. So those assets just seem to be the biggest thread that's coming through, from what from what I'm hearing. So somehow or another, there's no doubt in my mind our communities are simply not interested in water reform. They want good water, don't get me wrong. And I think, a lot of what we've said around the table here, there's no question around quality and standards that Waipa has nearly always delivered. it's around the reform, and I just don't think our communities want it. So I just want to go back to the feedback that we're presenting to central government and just say a stronger community voice around just the fact that the reforms that just aren't really wanted by our communities. That's the sense I have.
And Jim, I can't help but agree with what Liz has just said, because really, you know, in the discussions that I've had in the community, their first question to me is, what's wrong with our water? Because they don't see. We drink it, we're not sick. And I think that's, yeah, I agree with what you've just said, Liz. And I agree with all the speakers, perhaps except Andrew. I just don't think handing over an asset like that. I just have come through an age where big is not always good, and I think that most of our community, or all of our community that have spoken to me, have said, well, we do not agree. So I can't help but underline everything else that's being said here. And I think it's your senior citizens who have had quite a loud voice in this, because they can't see anything wrong with what you're doing now. We drink clean water, we dispose of our dirty water in a good way. It's not fed into the sea like maybe some of the other cities and entities around the coast of New Zealand. And I think you're going to take a heck of a lot more convincing for them to believe that a change to a big organisation, and, you know, currently we senior citizens have had a lot to look at. We've been told that change to technology is good, and yet we haven't found that, you know. So I can see where their thinking gets blocked when you can actually see that change is not necessarily when things currently are not looking too bad.
Yeah, thanks, Hazel. Look, I think that's a fair comment, that the feedback we're getting is based on the standards that is set for in Waipa. But we do need to acknowledge that around the country that standard is not universal, and there are problems out there, and it's not only in terms of the quality, it's also the ability to be able to fund the new standards that are going to be enforced, and have the communities got the capacity to actually to fund those improvements. And I suppose I always come back to the fact, well, if the community haven't got that ability, then that's when central government needs to step in, as they have done in the past with grants and subsidies, to enable those communities to be able to look after themselves with a bit of help. So, but look, I think it's definitely a concern from central government that the costs are going to grow, and the communities have got to be strong enough to be able to actually fund those changes. But look, I think we've all just been through our 10-year plans. There's been a colossal increase in the costs that we've all identified going into our plans. And I think it was, well, a number of the speakers have already said, take our time, do it, and take everybody with us. And we've got time to have a look and see if the communities can actually deliver what they say they're going to deliver in their 10-year plans. Over the next 3 years, we will know if we can actually deliver the intent, I suppose, of that 10-year plan. Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Very supportive of what Susan said. I just wanted to say on the water, that I found the advertising campaign by the government a real affront to local government New Zealand. When you see ads where you have green water coming into a bath, it is beyond belief. Now, we went to a meeting at Rotorua where we asked the Department of Internal Affairs what did they think was an estimate of the number of people affected by bad water. Now, the answer was 30,000 people, and we sat there in amazement, but came home and did some homework. In the Ministry of Health records, it showed 537 people were supposedly, they suspected, affected by water in their system. Guess what? Not one of those people laying a complaint or going to a doctor was drinking water from a council entity. It was water from outside council entities. Yet the government have built on the Havelock North as the big ogre, and you've all got to change. We've got the people that are going to be looking after the water. I do not know from a person that's been involved with water all my life what the hell they're going to do to put Waipa water, make Waipa water better. It's beyond belief. And I honestly don't believe big is better. Every time we get a big outfit, it's sloppy and no service, and the ratepayers get grumpy. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned in our submission is the serious effect it's going to have by losing between 43 and 45 staff, men on the ground and support staff for our water entity, and what that does to council. And that, to me, is a real effect that we need to be looking at. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah.
Bruce.
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally agree with Councillor Webber, and some of the correspondence we've all had. And mine says the infantile advertising campaign being run by central government, and it goes on. So we don't need to go on to that. That's just the comment backing up Graham, what he's just said. Two questions. One, I think maybe for you, Dawn. Is there any truth of what I've heard that even rural water tanks will have testing imposed on them at the owner's cost? That's one, and maybe Jim may answer the other one. Is there any chance that a referendum could be held so our ratepayers could actually have their say? Maybe it's not, but could you comment on that? Well, there's two questions.
Through Your Worship, certainly the first one, under the Water Services Bill that's just about to go through its third reading in Parliament, so Taumata Arawai will be required to look at all water suppliers where people are supplying water to more than one dwelling. So yes, where people are using water tanks and the like, but they're supplying more than one dwelling, they will be required to meet certain standards. Within the Water Services Bill, they've come up with approved solutions to work through that, but yeah, they will be picked up so that those do come under the regime. Through Your Worship, with respect to a referendum, I've heard no commentary coming from the government in terms of what form of consultation they may take if they move to an opt-in, opt-out as the next stage of these reforms discussions. So yeah, I certainly haven't heard anything other than the calls from our community for a referendum.
Yeah, Gary, did you want to make a comment on the referendum?
So that has been quite a strong thread that's come through from the community feedback, and the council may wish to include that in its submission to central government and local government New Zealand. Any decision in relation to a referendum will sit with central government.
Yeah. Okay.
Your Worship.
So at the moment, Bruce, I'd just add there that we're not in a position to go out because what we're being told is that we actually don't have a final proposal to actually consult on or even go for a referendum on. So until the final proposal is put forward, then the argument is that we haven't got something definitive to talk to the ratepayers or the community about.
And from my perspective, being a rural councillor, that's like scare tactics that these people are running scared. They don't know what's ahead of them. There's so much untruths going out there that they come to us and think, and we try and give answers, but we can't give any answers. Just like everyone else, it's just not on the time they're taking.
Yeah, Liz.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to kind of explore that whole community engagement thing, because we obviously done some online bits and pieces, but you're right, Jim, I guess we don't have anything definitive, but our community wants us, I believe, to be engaging with them on this. So I feel really in an awkward place. And, I just noticed just with various conversations going on. Lou, I think you've got a kind of like a public forum or an opportunity for people to come and talk. Is that something we should be doing, across the district? I just kind of wanted to explore that, because I know there's talk about Cambridge doing something too. Pretty hard, when you don't have a final proposal, but I guess I'm just re-entering that conversation we had together a couple of weeks back around where to from here. We've got our feedback going back to central government, but in terms of public meetings, I think our community does want to see more. So just wanted to open that kind of conversation back up again.
Yeah. Andrew.
Thanks, Jim. I just also wanted to add, I forgot when I was talking before, the public ad campaign from whoever, it was absolutely atrocious and poorly timed, poorly executed. It was a debacle. And I see as recently as 2 or 3 days ago, it was still happening as well, which is, yeah, look, I agree with what a lot of people are saying. Don't get me wrong. This definitely is rushed. It's the questions of who appoints it's not so much ownership. Who appoints the board of directors that run Entity B, all that kind of thing. There's lots of questions to be answered. It's just that, yeah, well, as I've said before, I find the numbers compelling. I still do. It's simple as that, I guess. But there's lots of stuff that has to get answered before, and including, as Liz was saying before, consulting the public properly with a proper proposal that is well understood and able to be well communicated. So I'm certainly all for that.
Andrew, can I just ask, have you read the Castalia report?
I will admit I have not read it through from cover to cover, Jim, but yeah, I have.
Because I suppose that is probably the only report that I've read that actually, I suppose, criticises the assumptions that have been made by everybody else in terms of the savings. They appear to me to be, well, Local Government New Zealand employed them to do a report for Local Government New Zealand, obviously. I know that the Whangarei councillor has also got them to do an independent report for them. And they are quite critical about the assumptions that have been made in terms of the savings. So I suppose when you look at it, there are reports out there for and against the savings that can be made. And I suppose where I'm sitting is it doesn't really matter which report you read, you've got to take on board that they're not likely to be right, whichever report it is. So the only way to work our way through this is in a measured way, and to try and pick up those forecast or predicted gains on a steady process, I suppose, of working through the reforms, not taking huge steps that can't be wound back if we get it wrong, and just work our way through it. But for every commentator that says you can get efficiencies in scale, there's somebody else out there that's saying you can't. And so it just depends which report you want to believe, I suppose. But I look at it and think, well, there's elements of truth in all of them, but you've got to try and pick that middle ground. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with about taking the measured approach for sure, but my assessment, I suppose, of the reports that are out there are that there are far more saying that the direction of the government's proposal is correct. Far more people who should know what they're talking about agree that there are significant efficiencies to be gained by the larger entity, and backed up by a lot of overseas experience as well, practical stuff. So yeah, but I certainly take a measured approach in getting all the information we can is wise.
Lou, thanks. Andrew, Lou?
Correct. Thank you, Your Mayor. I just wanted to say a couple of things that really quite concern me. Firstly, I agree totally with Dawn. Dawn, and Jim, your paragraph, very good, excellent, I think it is. But I do happen to agree with what Susan was saying earlier, that we do need to be a bit stronger. One thing that really worries me is that we don't have this criteria that they're saying we're going to have higher standards. But we're being told that that's in the future. We don't get told what these higher standards are going to be. They will develop that at some future time. And this seems to be the whole addict behind everything we're looking at the moment, that we ask specifics, we get told it's in the future. It will save money. We will be able to achieve these things if we comply. However, we don't have the ground rules that we're having to comply with. And that really worries me. It comes right back to that. The big thing I have with this as well, that this is very much a top-down decision. We as local bodies have always governed as a local body from a bottom up. We react to what our ratepayers, who are our principal funders, actually require of us. And I feel that this is far more coming from a top-down. And I happen to agree a little bit with what Councillor Pettit or Mike said, that there's more of an agenda to this than we believe, because we haven't got what this will impact on us with local governance or with the Resource Management Act and all of the others, which all have to be released. This is too quick, and it is in a situation where I believe they haven't thought of stormwater. We've got large areas of land that we use on swales, etc. Who owns them? Who's going to control them? How is it going to happen? This needs a huge amount of discussion before we go any further. And I strongly believe that we want to go back at this consultory page to government and say that we need far more input and more time and more information before we can develop this.
Thanks, Lou. Mike.
Thanks for that, Lou. And just off the back of that, I think we can't forget also that there's times to be nationalistic, but there's times to look after your own patch. And we are actually Waipā district councillors. We're not New Zealand councillors or MPs or anything else. We're actually here to look after 50-odd thousand ratepayers in our district. And with that, again, around this rush and this timing, our staff have not, we're about to spend tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars on water upgrades over the next 10 years, in fact, hundreds of millions of dollars, over the next 10 years, which we have factored into an average rate increase, which our community are happy to accept. The sewage system that we're looking at putting in to Cambridge is the equivalent of the top-notch current system in New Zealand. If not, it's going to be better. So you would surely hope that our system will meet those standards in terms of that component of the water. And I guess the other thing is our staff have not been given the opportunity or the time, and will never get the time if this goes through in its current format, to actually do the real analysis on what infrastructure, based on these standards that Lou's talked about, how are we placed as Waipā district to actually meet these going? Is it going to be, as the government has said, really unaffordable? Are we actually luckily in a position where it is actually going to be affordable for our ratepayers? And it comes back to, we're actually elected by our ratepayers, not elected nationally. And I think we've got to look after ourselves first here, because we're answerable every 3 years to our ratepayers. It's the government to be answerable to the nation, not us.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments? Has everyone had a comment that they wish to make? So look, I suppose in summary then, Dawn, did you want to say anything in the conclusion?
Only if we're ready to start looking at maybe an amended resolution C or recommendation C in terms of resolution as to how we might move forward, given the what we've heard today, and firming up the submission. But certainly nothing in response to the conversation that we've had.
Thanks, Dawn. Gary, did you want to add anything? He's not listening. He's frozen. Roger.
Sorry, I'll just unmute. Yeah. There was a fair bit of talk back on the radio about the fact that on Seek, the jobs for the 4 new entities are already being advertised. Have we any validation of that, Dawn? Do you know?
I wasn't aware, Councillor Gordon, and no, I certainly haven't seen or heard anything along those lines.
Yeah,
so
well, I mean, if that is the case, it's really not on, and it's kind of a fait accompli situation, if that's correct. But
Roger, I haven't got anything definitive, but I had a bit of a look to see what was going on, and I suspect that it's councils actually putting out adverts for staff and using the 3 waters as they want an engineer for their 3 waters, and it's being interpreted that it's for the new entities. And I think it's individual councils that are using the 3 waters. In the past, they've asked for a sewage treatment plant operator or a water supply engineer. But I think that it appears to me that it looks like it's just councils using, we want somebody to work in our 3 waters, and the assumptions being made that it's the new organisation, not existing councils. So I don't know that there's much validity to those comments. But
maybe
look,
I'm
not 100% sure.
Jim, I'm just in there now, and you're totally correct.
You're right.
And I'm also thinking I'm in the wrong job, because these people get paid very good money.
Good, Mike. Okay.
But what it does show, if there are that number of ads that are out there, then there must be quite a pressure on the pool of knowledge, skilled staff in that 3 waters area. And if you're going to try and split those between the new entities and existing councils, that's going to be a challenge.
And Roger, I think you're right. And I think that in one sense, that's where local government collectively has fallen down. In the far distant past, when the Ministry of Works were around, they ran training programs for water treatment plant operators, sewage treatment plant operators. They had public health engineers that advised council. And when the reforms of the 1980s struck and that was all disbanded, local government should really have picked up that responsibility and started in employing cadets and training people, because there is a real shortage in the industry at the moment, and it's almost like truck drivers. Everybody's getting older and dropping off, and all of those training skills and things that were built up in the past, now the chickens are coming home to roost. And I suppose in some of the more detailed submissions and the changes that we could make to make things better is that maybe it's over to local government New Zealand to pick that responsibility up and start organising the necessary training, and maybe employing those public health engineers to give advice to the council around the country to avoid us having to go out to expensive consultants. So there's all of those sorts of improvements that we should be doing or could be doing, and maybe we have dropped the ball in terms of making sure that we've looked after our industry for the long term. Yeah. So I definitely think there's improvements that we need to do as a collective that we probably can't do on our own. But I certainly 100% agree with Mike's comments and others that we are elected to look after Waipa and not the nation. Although obviously we've got an interest in what's going on, that's not where our responsibility lies. So look, I've taken out of the discussion, look, there's a strong, apart from Andrew, and I acknowledge your concerns about the efficiency side of it, but the majority, I think, are feeling that the Appendix 8, which is our submission, needs to be strengthened so that it's really clear that we are opposed to the reforms as they stand at the moment, but we're not opposed to improving the standards of water and sewage and stormwater across the country. But we feel that there's a more cooperative and a stage process that could be gone into that would be better for the country. Is that where we're sitting, Gary?
There was just one other thread that came through, Your Worship, and that was in support of Councillor Liz and Councillor Lou's comment around this being a very top-down decision-making process and a desire before any further steps are taken to engage more thoroughly with our community.
Yep. So has that covered off everything? Thanks for that, Gary. So we're obviously going to need to, with Dawn, to pull that together into an amended Appendix 8. So we could circulate that before it's got to go on Friday, is that correct?
Our goal was to get it off on Thursday evening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mayor Jim, can I just add into that? Is there an appetite for people to support a slowing down of the process?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so if that can be borne out reasonably clearly in it, and a desire for any change to be something that's more widespreadly, garners more widespread support, because we want it to be successful, and it's not going to be if there's opposition, but both at a territorial authority level and a community level. So, like Liz has said, the need to consult and talk with our communities, all that sort of stuff sort of feeds back into that hopeful improved understanding and buy-in that I would assume that they'd be wanting. So yeah, we can ask to slow it down and let's try and get it done on a more cooperative basis.
Okay. Mike.
Yeah, sorry, just one more thing too, and it's something that was brought up by a few of the councillors, and Liz alluded to it also through the mayor, is these meetings that councillors are, I think, definitely holding, and Lou's leading the charge there in Te Awamutu, and the Cambridge councillors are getting together this evening or this afternoon to look at doing something similar. Now, though we're not supposed to consult, are we happy that we ask for forgiveness rather than permission and actually just go out and engage with our community here?
Look, from my perspective, Mike, I don't think there's any problem in disseminating the information that we've got. It's not a public formal consultation round, so I haven't got any problem. I would just err on the side of caution in terms of, if we're having public meetings, making sure that they comply with the COVID restrictions for level 2. And I think Lou's made the comment that he'll have someone counting people in to make sure that we don't get over 100. And that's something that we just need to be cautious of. But yeah, look, I don't see that there's any problem in getting that information out.
Yeah, and I guess maybe if we go on with the attitude of, so tell the kids 2 ears in one mouth, which means we're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. So I guess effectively it is to do a lot of listening and just do some clarifying as best we can. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Mike. Claire.
Yes, Jim, thanks. Just on this point about community consultation, which I think is a great move. One of the criticisms has been that if we were going to do formal consultation, that we should have more than the status quo and the DIA's proposal, that there should be another option provided. And of course, the difficulty is, like, how would we even work something up for that, because we're not resourced for it, we haven't really planned for it or anything. But I just want the group to be mindful that if we should be thinking about what would an alternative be if we didn't have, the status quo and the preferred option as it stands at the moment. That's all, and how we would go about putting something together, really.
Yes, Claire. Look, I agree. In Dawn's report, there are a number of different options that have been looked at. They're variations on the theme rather than a completely fresh look in terms of identifying what are the real problems and factually based, not just on a perception. What are the real problems, and then what can we do to resolve those, rather than come up with a solution to fit a perceived problem that's not necessarily there. So I suppose it's a piece of work that local government New Zealand should be doing, and maybe we should be putting it on them to actually do the necessary work on this issue, because it's too big for one council to front this on its own. It needs some support, I would suggest.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really with you on this too. I've given it some thought, in that, in a way, that it's a bit of a contradiction, really. For us in Waipaha, we'd really need to look at what our position was and what we would need, and analyse our, next 10 or 20 years, and work at what we need, and maybe come up with something that we feel would deliver for us. But I agree, if you're taking the broader view, it might be better to sort of stratify the whole country's water business into various categories, and so it's not a one size fits all, and then look at how a solution could be for the various different sizes or different contexts that they are looking, that might present, a different approach. I think that's the difficulty. There's such a broad range of needs across all our various territorial authorities that it needs some kind of lens laid over it to how could we make some order out of this if we weren't going to go with the four, large entities, and what would be the best approach.
Yeah, so if it was assumed that the Tamata Arawai is going to be established, they're going to start, or he's going to, at the moment will start enforcing the standards, and the water supply standards are pretty well fixed. There's no suggestion that the drinking water standards are going to go up. It's just they're going to enforce the ones that are already there, and that's what didn't happen in Havelock. But in terms of, obviously, sewerage discharge standards are going to obviously need to be set, and as stormwater are. But if the regulator starts enforcing those standards over the first the 3 years of our 10-year plans, and starts to identify where these problems are that are assumptions at the moment, then the whole country can focus its attention on fixing the problems that are in possibly isolated pockets around the country, and stop wasting a whole lot of money on areas that actually don't need reform. But look, it's whether we can get government to get to that point, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Jim Brown here.
Yep.
The Federated Farmers identified 109,000 points where the regulators are going to have to front up. I've worked out that that's in excess of $48 million just to have them on the ground. But government have just announced they're spending $24 million in Northland for 3,000 water tanks for people that can't afford water tanks. If they can't afford water tanks, how's the regulator going to bowl up to them and say, you've got to do this to improve the water off your roof? It's just an enormous job.
Yeah. It's the devil's in the detail continually, isn't it? So.
Yeah. And we've seen those salaries, advertised. Hello, boys. Going to be cheaper? I don't think so.
No. Okay. All right. I think we've captured all of the perspectives around the room. I think there's general agreement to to toughen up the response and obviously make note of the issue that Gary said, that the top down rather than the bottom up approach, and the desire for council to want to consult with the community, and the potential for a referendum is there, I suppose. But at least, at the very least, consult as we do with any other big decision that we make.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have a recommendation that's there in front of us. Dawn, did you? I think it. I'm just looking for where it. In 2A, the recommendation, the feedback is to local government and DIA that we need to put in there to make it clear that it's going to both organisations. But then I think the B and C are okay, except that we acknowledge that we've got to change Appendix 8 to toughen it up and put all those things in that we've talked about this morning, and we'd need to pull that together.
So through your worship, governance have been working away in the background and come up with a proposed amendment C, which council delegates authority to the chief executive and mayor to submit feedback on the Three Waters reform to local government New Zealand and the Department of Internal Affairs as detailed in Appendix 8 of the report, and further amended by the presentation provided at the meeting and any other amendments as a result of the discussion at the meeting. So just to make sure that we capture all of those conversation points.
Is everyone comfortable with that? Thanks for that.
Well, I'm hoping that we'll see a copy maybe by tonight on there that we can. Thanks, Dawn. Got the nod there. That's important to see that. Yeah. And also, do we need to be a little bit tougher and actually explicit in saying we don't intend to join up with entity B?
When just to remind you, sorry, through your worship, that we're not here to make a decision on opting in and out. It's just to provide feedback, and I think given the advice we've received previously, we need to be somewhat careful around the language we use there.
No, but Dawn, what it's saying in here is that we need to do under another long-term plan to ensure it meets Section 130 of the local government agreement. But 21 councils today have made the decision to run into their entity. Why are we holding back? We've got a huge majority of people who've told us they don't want to go down this track. Don't we want to put our effort into something here to support what we're giving them? I understand what you're saying, but how come we're lagging in here?
Through your worship, maybe if we used language along the lines of reject the government's proposal.
I think we've got to do something very similar to that. Otherwise, we're just abdicating our responsibilities from a community point of view.
Yeah, Roger's put the thumbs up there. So look, I think that is covered off in the comments that we need to toughen that response to make it absolutely clear that we don't support the proposals as being put out at the present time, and whether that's entity B or the full proposition that's put to the country, we're rejecting the whole lot.
Jim, can I just ask Susan to come in here and see if she's got a comment around this?
Sorry, Graham.
Can we just have Susan come in to see if she's got a comment on this issue? Yeah, I mean, she's illegal.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, because you're talking about a process that's been really structured and defined by the government around what they want to hear from us right now. And they've made it clear from what I've been able to read that they don't want an opt-in or opt-out, vote, if you like, from us, which kind of plays to my whole frustration with this whole process being so controlled by them. So I have difficulty with that in and of itself. But I think if we can probably appease both camps, if you like, by making the wording pretty strong without having to use the words opt-out right now. And I think, like, as has been suggested, if we just use words such as reject the proposal as it stands, I think that is probably as far as we could go. But look, I totally agree with your frustrations, Graham, you know, and I guess what I was trying to say earlier about the process being really, I found frustrating and disillusioning in equal measure. But I sort of feel like we should probably be playing according to those rules right now in terms of the language we need to be using. But at the same time, assert our absolute rejection of what the current proposal is.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Mike, were you just wanting to say something?
I was just happy to move A through C with the amendment to the appendix.
Thanks, Mike. And Andrews, were you seconding or did you have a comment?
I have a comment.
And then you'll second it?
It depends on what it is, Jim. Because if we're voting to simply reject the proposal from government in holus bolus, if you like, in total, I would have to vote against because I feel it would significantly financially impair our ratepayers, our water-connected ratepayers in particular, but not just water-connected, because it's all about stormwater and environment as well. So yeah, I feel it would significantly impair our ratepayers going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think your concerns are noted. And yeah, look, I was being a bit facetious, looking for a seconder, but Claire's got his hand up.
Well, I actually agree with Andrew in that I don't really support the use of the word reject, and I'd rather say something like categorically don't support, because I would be concerned that the government might see us as spitting the dummy, so to speak, and that might force their hands towards you know, a mandatory pathway. But I think by saying that we don't support it, it's a bit more conciliatory than reject.
Yeah. Okay. Look, leave it with us to tighten up that Appendix 8 so that it's firm, but we're not, as you say, just totally opposed to change and giving an excuse almost to bring down the regulatory sledgehammer to try and crack this nut, which is still on the cards, to be fair.
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Yes, you second, Lou, have you? Yep. So we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
And do you want your vote recorded against it?
No, Jim, I'm not against the proposal as it's now worded. There's lots of questions that need to be answered before it goes ahead.
Yeah, and I think we've all got those, Andrews, and that's half the problem, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thank you for the discussion, and I hope everyone's had the opportunity to put their point of view. This is really a critical issue for local communities across the country. So it is one of the most important issues that we've had to decide on, I suppose, certainly in my term. All right, thank you for that. So we're moving on. The next resolution, we need to exclude the public. We have some.
I'll move.
Graham moved and Andrew second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary?